Our next presenter is Dr. Liza van der Merwe, and she's going to be talking about warm data as an emergent approach in complex adaptive systems thinking. So Liza is a sense maker and systems thinker. She is responsible for resilience assessments in ESCOM, where she leans towards a socio-technical lens of inquiry in spite of the technocentric nature of the industry. In 2019, she was awarded with an interdisciplinary PhD from the University of Stellenbosch for the application of complexity and resilience thinking to resilience assessment. Her particular interests center around complex thinking is to better understand the institutional framework that will enable general social resilience to emerge within essential services organizations. So Liza, over to you.
Thank you very much, Andries. And when I'm listening to what you're saying about me, it makes sense what I'm going to be talking to you guys about. So please tell me if you can see my slides.
We can hear and we can see your slides.
Brilliant. Good stuff. So I want to firstly start off by the nature of the world. And let's fly in here to Louise, that is lying on the lawns of the Google headquarters. Are there boundaries that separate Louise from her context? Can Louise be decontextualized? In other words, can she be studied separate from her context? Let me just move this chair. I can see. There you go. So in 2012, when this footage was taken with Louise there on the Google headquarters, the internal Google company motto was "do no harm." But now you can mysteriously lose your job for questioning company policy. By their very nature, complex problems cannot be solved once and for all. In 2022, actually just last weekend, in fact, the chief tweeted that the Twitter engineer, Eric, who criticized him, is now fired. At its inception, Twitter became the first social media platform to create a whole other layer of social emergence that previously was unknown to us as a species. Seemingly, very small things can have non-linear ramifications that reverberate across multiple contexts. Every employee across all Musk's ventures felt Eric's pain when he was fired in a tweet last weekend. What is the nature of systems in which such deep uncertainty is the order of the day? How can this be? Just pause for effect with this. Let's move. How can this be? Well, the world is VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And while that description has been used since the late 1980s, it's no longer enough to capture the complexity of the world. And a new term has been introduced about 3 years ago, that the world is Barney. Brittle, anxious, nonlinear, and incomprehensible. The world is constituted of complex adaptive systems. Complex adaptive systems consist of agents, components, and relationships that are continually changing, evolving, learning, and adapting in response to one another as well as their environment. Because of that, complex adaptive systems continuously shift, evolve, and transform in unpredictable ways. They operate far from equilibrium and can dynamically shift across multiple fitness landscapes into completely different states. is always more than what meets the eye and more than what can be known. Due to this complexity, we face three systemic tragedies. Firstly, the tragedy of the commons, the tragedy of horizons, and the tragedy of consciousness. From the tragedy of the commons, individual users of a common good act without regulation for that common good, and this ends up destroying the very resource they are exploiting. Relative to the tragedy of the horizons, our short-termism makes that we're unable to take the deeper systemic structures into account, and ignoring such structures distort and damage them. And this feeds back into decisions that further erode the viability of our society. The tragedy of consciousness consists of three parts. Firstly, our brilliance at solving complicated problems blinds us from seeing how to manage the complex. Our quest for rationality has blinded us to our real presence in the world and our effect on it. And our cultural conditioning is preventing us from accessing the creativity needed to mitigate and transcend our predicament. This is where integral theory becomes an interesting way of looking at holistic approaches to deal with such complexity. Integral theory is referred to as the theory of everything. And besides looking at individual, collective, exterior, and interior perspectives, it then offers, firstly, on the interobjective side, that we can deal with systems and structures. On the objective side, we can deal with and study behavior, habits, skills. On the subjective side, we can deal with consciousness. What is my worldview and its values? What is my purpose and how do I know? And on the intersubjective side, we're dealing with culture, shared values, shared purpose, shared norms, and how history evolve and emerge. These holistic approaches offers us the opportunity and the invitation to cultivate our ambidexterity, a term I quite enjoy. On the one hand, Peter Checklands invited us to consider both hard systems approaches and soft systems approaches. Then interdisciplinary perspectives invites us to consider both quantitative big data approaches that are very rational, as well as qualitative rich data perspectives that are relational. And if the rational and the hard can be deemed as cold, one of my favorite systems thinkers is Nora Bateson, that invites us to consider warm data. During COVID, I participated in several warm data labs globally and based in Africa. And honestly, it's like drinking a hot, hearty soup on a shivering cold night. Warm data lab processes highlights interdependencies and generates understanding of systemic patterns. It's a tool for revealing relationships that are integral and woven into the complex fabric of the issues that we are working on. Warm data lab processes allows participants to respond to the patterns with a much broader comprehension, which enables new societal responses to complex challenges. I'm entangled in some thick bramble bushes, because probably every characteristic of complexity can be illustrated in Eskom's context. In many ways, I think Eskom feels like the new Enron, because it has become the go-to case study that business schools across the globe can study to try and make sense. What on earth is going on? Or what happened there? Or how did it come to be like this? So the question for me, and I think it's your question, how can we draw on the insights and the inspiration from complexity to be able to contribute to the change that we want to see? So we set out with some methodological objectives to be able to embrace a theory of change that's informed by social complexity, to aim at triple loop learning, and to effect change on the 3 systemic tragedies, to follow a salutogenic approach to enhance our overall levels of health in the system, and to employ a method that catalyzes emergence, activates social innovation, and cultivate collective action. And such a method, one of a few, is appreciative inquiry. And the objective that we set out to achieve here is to cultivate system stewards with an understanding of complex adaptive systems that are able to act with appropriate nuance to the depths of the systemic challenges that we are facing, that we are entangled in. We are part of it. We're not separate from. And willing to be the change that we want to see in the world. This has led to an how that we co-created a 5-day learning intervention that combines systems thinking, resilience thinking, and design thinking. And it combines these ways of thinking with mindsets, principles to apply, and practices to participate in, into an interactive learning adventure based on the narrative arc of a hero's journey. One of the innovations that I have particularly enjoyed to see the ease with which participants design desirable futures is an inverted iceberg. On the first day, we used the standard iceberg to explore the messiness of the challenges that we are entangled in and that they want to effect change on. And after applying resilience building principles to the complex adaptive system that they want to effect change in, following this appreciative inquiry process, they find it so easy to populate the inverted iceberg. And the patterns are fascinating. Provisional results is we have now applied this approach across 4 different cohorts, 1 a month since July. And the numbers are easy. Based on the numbers, people are feeling amazing. The feedback is really great. Making sense of the rich data is still an activity that we're ongoing. However, because the results, the feedback on day 5 is so, I look at it and I'm thinking this is too good to be true. So what I'm showing you here is a dyad across the extreme that this thing has defeated and drained me. In the middle is no change. And the extreme right is I am a supercharged hero. So many, the majority of participants convey that they are supercharged heroes at the end of day 5. And to be a bit more, but does this last? How can we monitor the impact and the durability of this change? It's too easy to feel great after an intervention and go back to the normal world the next day and say, oh, I'm back in this mess. So we held a follow-up session early in November to verify the durability of this. And participants share of change in themselves, their teams, their power stations, as well as their homes. And this is the same question asking months after having participated in the event. What is the sustained change in your way of thinking, the hope that you feel for the future, the energy that levels of energy that you have? Understandably, that one has decreased, but it's still so positive, as well as agency to be the change you want to see in the world. They were participants in their conversation are continuing to create ripple effects in their own spaces. And a common refrain was about mental shifts, increases in energy and agency, speaking up, standing up, and stepping up. And those, based on what I've heard, would be the categories that I think we can use for some further narrative analysis. But that is still outstanding. Anecdotal feedback is positive. They describe the intervention as a platform to create motivated, accountable change makers. A space where employees can recognize that collaboration and teamwork are essential for problem solving and success. And one of the participants, I don't know if I have time, maybe I will mention, at the end of day 5, it looked like a confession. She said, I have been such an active part of the unions, and up to now I've been fighting management. And from now on, I've decided to fight corruption. And months afterwards, she wrote, knowing that there are more people with whom I share a common interest of building the Eskom we want, and seeing it return to its former glory days, day by day, has brought me joy again. So in conclusion, the world is complex. We are embedded in complex adaptive systems, and this complexity has profound implications and holds power of explanation for the VUCA, the Barney, and the deep tragedy that we see around us. We can't control or predict an outcome in complex adaptive systems, but we have agency and influence. Holistic approaches invites us to cultivate ambidexterity in our ways of thinking, acting, and being. System stewards seek to improve the health of the complex system, adaptive system that we are embedded in. And people hungry for change and willing to be the change they want to see in the world. And when I looked at this sentence, I recognized that even though I wrote it initially as the participants who show up to these interventions, they are hungry to see this change. I think it is true for system stewards seeking to affect change. I think it is true for us as systems practitioners. We are hungry to see this change. So it's almost like a meta observation. And Margaret Mead never doubted that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And therefore, my recommendation is that since, in my view, our future is intertwined with the well-being of the planet, of people, and the place where we are, where you are, where I am, let's use our systems lens to make the world a better place. And it is my view that if business become a force for good, then profitability and prosperity will be a byproduct of doing good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Very insightful, very interesting. I'm going to open the floor for some questions. So please raise your hand. If I don't see you, just make some noise and ask Lisa a question if you have one. Thank you. If I don't see hands, I'll do Russian volunteers. Okay, we've got a Cornay.
From what I'm hearing, you're saying Java is...
Can you hear me? Just want to make sure
Yes,
I'm
yes,
audible.
Cornay, we can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lisa. This was maybe it's just maybe a comment for me for now. I really felt it when you said we want to, like, we are tired of not seeing results, and we actually want to see a difference. We want to feel and see a difference. We're tired of doing things that don't have effect.
I hear you, Cornay, not just for what you're saying, but for the body language that is I hear I don't know if it's language. Maybe it is language. Maybe it's the body language that I hear in your voice.
Thank you, Corneille. Who else has got a question? So Lisa, maybe a curveball here. So do you think the Twitter world is going to be able to become a complex adaptive system to the big twit?
It is that. The Twitter world is a complex adaptive system. There's no question in my mind about that. Let me ask you, Andries, if you look at our chief twit, is his approaches informed by complicated? He's brilliant at the complicated. To what he's masterful at complicated and at systems. But I wonder, and at engineering systems and engineering and designing and building systems that build systems. But to what extent is his approaches informed by complexity, or is he just a masterful? I don't know. How ambidextrous do you think Elon is?
I think he's an actor. Now, I think, look, in all honesty, he's an excellent actor. He gives a message across excellently, and he's a risk taker of note, because I think, you know, the way that he's gone about setting up his companies, it's you know, how do you get a bigger market capitalization for a business that does, I mean, it's probably manufacturing as many vehicles as we manufacture in South Africa, yet it is the most valuable auto manufacturer in the world, and you get the Toyotas globally who go in excess of 10, 15 million vehicles a year compared to that. So there's something there that's speaking to the investors and not necessarily grounded in reality. Look, I look at it from an engineering point of view. I'm an engineer, and I work in the motor industry, and I know how I would value an organization, and I value more on assets and turnover and realism than what your average American investor do. So yeah, so is he brilliant? He's brilliant at what he does. Do I know what he does? I don't think so.
I think he's comfortable with emergence, and I think he creates it.
And he's not scared. He's not
Elon
scared.
Musk is definitely also like Enron and Eskom. I think a person and a movement, a global movement that will redefine systems engineering and engineering systems approaches, if we only can make sense of how he's doing it.
It's a good point. Is there anybody else who's got a question? I see. Is it somebody? I don't see any hands. Okay. Lisa, thank you very much. As I said, a fascinating presentation. And even my wife came here and stood looking at that initial slide of yours and just stood in awe of, you know, that scalability that I think sometimes we lose because we're so busy with the world in front of us. We forget about the scalability. So thank you very much. And